Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you here. This is our second year for presenting a program on immigration to the League of Women Voters Pasadena area. And it is the second year that we've had like standing room only. So thank you for being so interested in this issue and this topic and learning more about it. Speaking of learning, we have a committee, as Catherine mentioned, that is growing like every month. We're up to 12, maybe 13 members on our committee. We're running out of space in the conference room. But if you're on the immigration committee, would you just stand quickly? Just show your hand or something if you can't get up. Look at that. That's our committee. Yay! And some standing in the back who we're in the standing room only gallery. Thank you. So we're very happy to be here. And as you heard Catherine present earlier, our committee is not only engaged in learning more about what's happening with immigration, but specifically learning immigration law and policy, and what does that mean for us. We are the League of Women Voters, and that means that we want to do things. We want to take action. We want to make sure that there's some progress happening on the immigration front. So as a U.S. partner, and I would go as far as to say a local Pasadena area partner, NALEO has really become a friend to us. And so this morning, we're presenting to you, and with a great presentation, Eli Flores. Some of you on the board may remember Eli. I believe Martha actually introduced us first to Eli. He did a little retreat for the board a couple of years ago. Eli Flores is currently the California Director of Civic Engagement for NALEO Educational Fund, where he manages statewide citizenship, voter engagement, and Census 2020 campaigns. NALEO Educational Fund is the nation's leading nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that facilitates full Latino participation in the American political process, from citizenship to public service. NALEO Educational Fund has led national, statewide, and regional campaigns and outreach efforts in the past 3 censuses. I'm not sure. You teachers tell me what the plural of that is. Prior to his current role, Eli served Youth Build International as a consultant for Latin America. Additionally, Eli was the founder and executive director for Leadership through Empowerment, Action, and Dialogue, better known as LEAD, and outreach manager for Grid Alternatives. He is a graduate of Claremont Lincoln University with a master's degree in social impact and received his bachelor's degree from Ashford University with an emphasis in organizational development. Please help me welcome Eli Flores.
All right. So thank you all for inviting me. So awesome to be out here. I love Pasadena. Your roads are always super curvy and fun to drive on. So thank you for bringing me up here. But I do want to thank Martha. This actually started with a lunch. We ate some Mexican food at Placita Olvera. If you haven't been, definitely go check it out. The old Mission on Cesar Chavez, or I think it's Sunset now or something. But we had lunch there, and we were just discussing, and long story short, it sort of has evolved into this awesome partnership, right? So it was great to see a lot of you on Saturday at our workshop. We partnered with the Teamsters local union to be able to provide this complete free service, also with Loyola Law School as part of their immigrant justice clinic, and they provide attorneys for us to be able to do all of the reviews of every single application that goes through there. We also had some electeds show up, which is really interesting. So Assemblymember Miguel Santiago showed up. State Senator Maria Elena Durazo showed up as well, and he's not currently an elected official, but Kevin De Leon, who previously had ran for Senate, also showed up. So they showed up, gave some encouraging words, and so NALEO stands for the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. So in addition to the services and the programs that we run, we also provide direct services to elected officials as well. And this is everyone from the local level, right? If you're a brand new elected official that just gets on a city council and you just want to learn about ethics, right? And what did you get yourself into, right? We will help them get up to speed. Simple as don't accept those Dodger tickets. That could be seen as an ethical problem. Very simple things that sometimes we overlook, right? We just think they're gifts. And then they're bribes. Anyways, so just very simple things to keep in mind, right? But we also do a lot of policy institutes as well. So we do a lot of sort of in-depth policy and research sort of analysis and then present that to electeds as well. So they're up to date with the issues that affect Latinos the most in the country. So that's what we do. So I'm super excited today. I'm going to be presenting on two main things today. So it says from immigration and democracy, from the census to the path to citizenship. But I'm going to start backwards. I'm going to actually start with citizenship first. And to be very exact, I'm starting from citizenship from the perspective of sort of the residency to citizenship. I'm not going to go backwards because it does take a whole nother level of expertise to really go into like TPS, DACA, visas, like all of that. Now, I know a lot of that, but I would not be comfortable with providing you a lot of the information because I don't want to be wrong about that. That right now, the status of TPS, DACA, and even visas is like very up in the air. A lot of things are going down. It's almost changing like every week. So I would not want to give you that. But I will talk from residency to citizenship. Then at the midway point, I will just cut and stop for questions about citizenship. And then I'll finish off with census, right, which is happening next year. But there's so many things going on now. In fact, yesterday I was in Oakland presenting to First Five Association and a part of all of the First Five programs in Northern California. And I will be actually going on tour with First Fives and doing presentations across the state to get First Fives already involved in making sure that children ages 0 to 5 get counted in 2020 census. So, and I'll be in Oakland again next week, and then I'll be in Sacramento next week, and Alex Padilla is presenting on something, and then a part of the Future of California Elections Conference. So, I'm on tour this whole next month. So I'm so glad I made a stop here, though. So I think we've already sort of talked about what we do at NALEO and who we are as an organization. We're a national organization. And for all of you that are definitely, I think, more experienced than me, our founder was actually Edward Roybal. He was the founder of NALEO, just as a quick little snapshot. So he founded NALEO, back in like the 70s, when I believe he was on like city council or something, or he was on that. Obviously, he moved up from there and did a lot of great things. But so his daughter is part of NALEO. She's a member of NALEO and a strong supporter of NALEO as well. But there's a lot of rich history of a lot of sort of elected officials that have really supported the work of NALEO, which is why we continue to do this work today. So I come from the civic engagement sort of department, and so there's three main functions to our civic engagement work. There's naturalization and citizenship, so I'll talk about that today. Voter engagement, the last time I came here, or not here, but to another facility, I presented on voter engagement, and particularly around Latinos and making sure that Latinos not only get registered to vote, but get the support they need to go out to vote and then get protected at their vote. You'd be surprised that at the last midterm election, there was some interesting voter suppression type tactics even happening here in California, which we were like, wow, California is so liberal. Then why are you asking for IDs, why are you only giving, voter forms for folks if they are going to vote Republican, right? This actually happened at polls here in California. So we During every election, NALEO deploys a voter protection team across the country. We have attorneys on standby that are ready to do rapid response in various states, right? And California is one of them. So especially around election time, even for next year, we would love to partner with you all on that. I think that would be awesome way for you all to get involved in like voter protection, right? And protecting the vote, no matter who you vote for, right? But let's just protect the vote, right? So more than happy to work with you on that. Lastly, Census 2020, which I'll definitely discuss right after this presentation. So it's a little light. Let me go back. It's a little light, and I can't really see the outside. But basically what I was trying to show is that the population in the millions, right, of Latinos, based on the trajectory that we have right now. So given the context of where we are in terms of Latino population, so in the United States, Latinos are the second largest population already in the United States, but we are the largest ethnic population in the United States. In California, we're the largest population, period, now, in California. So just to keep in mind that in the same sort of trajectory that we're going on now, by 2035, we will double that, right? So by 2035, we can possibly be the largest ethnic and the largest population group in the U.S. So I think that when it comes to like elections, when it comes to thinking about the Latino or the potential of what the power of Latinos are, and this is something that we stress with both political parties, is you must invest now in this population because we are only growing. And if you expect Latinos to sort of support, whether it be if you're a candidate or support policy and any of that nature, the investments should really happen now and at every election, right? So one of the things that happened in Orange County, again, trying to stay nonpartisan, right? But you saw a change in Orange County, right? A lot of those seats that have been traditionally red sort of flipped. Now, one of the things that folks didn't talk about of why that also happened was that new registered voters in Orange County, the numbers rose dramatically. Second thing is that they didn't realize that the new voters, majority were actually Latinos. And then the third thing is that majority of the new voters went Democrat. So I think we have to pay attention to these trends, right, and these things that are happening because they may be good indicators for what might happen in 2020, right, both in the midterm side and also in the general. So I wanted to give you the context of like our population size and how it's growing. So nearly 1 out of 4 of every U.S. resident under 18 is Latino. So we're talking about 24%. About 1/3 of Latinos are under 18, 33%, compared to 22% of non-Latinos. So to put it into that perspective in that context as well. So the Latinos are great in numbers, but we're relatively young, right? We're still a relatively young population, right? So we're going to be getting older, right? And we are going to get those steady voters that are going to happen, right? One of the struggles that we are facing, though, is that even though we have this big population, we're still not voting in the numbers that would reflect that population, right? Like if we actually voted in the large numbers that we are, we would be having a greater impact on elections, which just goes back to my point of like we have to continue to make investments in the Latino communities because when you invest, they do come out, right? So give you some other context in terms of nativity and the U.S. citizenship population, right? So nearly 2/3, 64% of Latinos are native born, and more than 1/3, 36%, are foreign born. So we've heard of some of these numbers. You might have heard of some of these numbers in other studies that you may have read, but some of the numbers that we come across based on some of the research is, there are an estimated 8.6 million Latino undocumented immigrants in the United States. I've heard other numbers thrown out there. I've heard like 11 million. I've heard like more. But it's really hard to say right now because what they're basing it on is the numbers that they capture coming across the border, now you know that everybody is coming through the way of like, hey, count me, I'm coming in illegally, right? So that's why the estimates are such that they range and they vary, right? But just to put it in context, it's in the millions of Latino undocumented individuals that are currently here in the country. The other number that's really important to keep in mind, because then I will be sort of moving into more of the conversations of legal permanent residents, is there are an estimated 3.9 million Latino legal permanent residents that are eligible to naturalize. But that, in fact, actually is a larger number now. I think this study was a couple years ago. So continued growth in Latino electoral power brings national attention to Latino engagement. Latinos were a decisive force in the race to the White House, driving turnout in key states such as Florida and Colorado. So still, even in fact, as we've seen in some states, and I know for certain here in California, we've seen the Latino vote had an impact on a lot of the races here. There is still not a big investment happening into these communities, right? The big investment continues to be in the high propensity voter category. The low propensity voter category still continues to be under sort of funded, under invested. So a lot of our work is really to invest in the low propensity voter in every election. That's really our sort of place where we try to do our work and most of our work in, which is an important part of making sure that Latinos get access to vote, those who are eligible, right? So this is what I want to get to in terms of the context, right, of when we're talking about from residency to citizenship. So right now, right, there's about an estimated 13.2 million lawful permanent residents in the United States. This is an approximate number. Now, does everybody know the difference? Pretty simple, like the difference between being a resident versus like the lower levels of sort of being here in the country, which is like either you're on TPS, which is sort of a worker permit. There's DACA, right, which was done under the Obama administration. There's visas, right, that could be, but these are lawful permanent residents, people who are permitted to live here in the country legally, right? They don't have the full status of citizenship, but they are residents of this country, right? So also known as green cards, right? So if you got a green card, and we call it green card in Spanish, tienes tu green card, and then you're like, yeah, I got my green card. So it's interesting, right? We know that. So you can't see this really, right? But out of those folks, they're applying for applying the residency restrictions. So you have to be, there's a couple of criteria to be eligible to actually fill out your citizenship and to apply. So one of them is if you at least have had 5 years of residency in this country, legal permanent residency. That's one criteria for you to be able to apply for citizenship. The second criteria is if you've had 3 years of citizenship, but you've been married to a U.S. citizen for at least 3 years. It's another sort of criteria of eligibility for citizenship. There are others. If someone is married to a person in the military and this person is currently being deployed, there's another sort of set of criteria that you can possibly also become citizen. But these are mainly the two main sort of eligibility criteria. Now, then we go down the line of like, obviously you have to have good moral character, which then means like if you've ever had any criminal background, it can put you in jeopardy, especially right now. If you've had any past deportation proceedings, anything like that, could also put you in jeopardy of not becoming a citizen, and actually can put you in deportation proceedings soon after applying for citizenship. So we don't recommend everyone to apply for citizenship, right? It's something that we take case by case. But so there are about, let me see, we obtain a total of eligible to naturalize 8.8 million that matches the aggregated numbers. So you can't really see it on there, right? But right now there is an estimated about 8 million, right? A little more than 8 million Latinos who are eligible to naturalize right now at this moment. What does that mean for like future elections or future voting? That means that all of these folks today can apply for citizenship. and they can then in turn become citizens, register to vote, and vote. It's a huge sort of number of potential voters, right? Now, there's a lot of issues why this 8.8 million or this 8 million does not take the steps. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the fears of taking the steps towards citizenship. Because you would think, well, why not? Just do it, right? There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of issues with that. Certainly, this administration has not made it easier, has made it a lot more complicated for folks to take that step towards citizenship. So here's the challenge, right? And I named it as a challenge. And this is the issues of why a lot of folks aren't taking the steps towards citizenship. Number one is the cost of citizenship has gone up dramatically in the last couple of years. Just the application alone costs $725, right? Now, for some of us, we would be like, it's worth it. For some of our lower income communities, that's a lot of money. I've had a husband and wife come to apply together, and their total cost of their application in the federal government is going to be a little more than $1,400, right? That could put a dent into your wallet, especially if you're living check by check, if you're only living on Social Security, if you're only living on social disability, whatever the case may be, this may be a lot of money for you. Now, there is a way for us to be able to help through available assistance. So the government currently does have what is called a fee waiver assistance, which if they do fit a low income criteria, or if they fit, or if they receive a mean tested benefit, which is Social Security, federal or food stamps, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, they can qualify for a fee waiver, which is either a reduction of half of that cost or a full reduction of the entire cost. So a lot of people just don't know that, right? So they don't take the step because they're like, oh, I don't have 725. Well, did you know that you can qualify? But by the way, this is under attack. The federal government wants to do away currently with all assistance. So they want to do away with it completely, right? So we're fighting that back on the advocacy side to basically say, no, you cannot do away with it. We need that assistance. This is part of our work. The length of processing is also becoming a deterrent for people. So it used to take about 6 to 8 months to go through this process, sometimes even shorter. If you have a very clear case, super easy, I've had cases that it took them 3 months, and they went through the entire process. So when you apply, that's step one. Step two is fingerprints, and you have to go into one of the facilities of USCIS, and you got to do fingerprints, you got to take photos, you got to do all these things. Next step is the interview. So you have to have an interview with an agent in front of you, and you're either going to do this interview in English. Again, for some of our Latinos, that's a deterrent because they don't speak English quite well. There are some criteria that you can qualify to have an interpreter, but you would have to be at a certain age, so 50 and older, and have a 20-year residency minimum, or you have to be 55 and older and have a 15-year of residency or more. Sorry, not minimum, but more. So there are some criteria where you could have a translator, but that's also a deterrent for a lot of folks as well. Last thing, which in my opinion right now is probably the strongest sort of deterrent, is the current political rhetoric around immigration in general. That is definitely has dissuaded a lot of people from doing anything that's government related, right? They have the residency card, and in their opinion, I don't have to renew my residency for 10 years. Therefore, I'm going to wait till this president's gone. And then, once this presidency is gone, the immigration law doesn't change, but what changes is the priorities that the president sets. So last president, the priorities around immigration were not to go after everyone that is violating immigration law, but it's to go mainly after real criminals, right? There was real crimes that were being committed by folks who were here. This president said the mere fact of being here is a crime. Therefore, you go after everyone. Everyone is a criteria. Everyone meets my criminal criteria, which means that you will all go after everyone, right? So USCIS or ICE, says yes and does a wink and a nod, and yeah, they will, but honestly, they don't have the man or woman power to do everything that this president wants to do. but it is a different set of priorities that are set by different presidents. So some of the folks are saying, I'm just going to wait it out. I'm going to wait it out, and I'm going to wait to see what happens after 2020, right? And that's a true thing. But the political rhetoric is definitely being an issue of why folks are deciding to not move forward in their process as well. So here's the opportunity, right? And I think it goes to one of the questions that I've been asked, like, what can the league do? How can the league support? So one is definitely advocating, right, on behalf of citizenship, and not just advocating to local electeds, so like congressional leaders, leaders in the Senate, folks that actually can bring up these issues directly to to USCIS, to ICE, like all these things, to the president, administration himself, bringing up these issues that I've discussed of like what's happening of folks being deterred to become citizens, but also advocating to people that are eligible to be citizens, right? Talking about the benefits. So when you become a citizen, you have the benefit of family reunification, right? You can apply for certain family members in other countries, right? To be able to come over to be residents, right? If you are a parent and you become a citizen when you're in this country and you have children in the country who are not yet citizens and are under the age of 16, they may be eligible for what is called derivative citizenship, that they derive citizenship because you become citizen, right? So another benefit that we should be talking to the community about. Full protections from deportation. That's the highest level of protection that anyone can have from deportation, right? If you're a citizen, you are now protected fully under our Constitution, right? You cannot just be deported anymore. Eligible to vote, right? Huge benefit. If you care about the issues that are affecting you the most in this country, well, what do you do about it? Well, you can vote at that point. You can register, you can vote. The next thing is fee waiver, right? Available to low-income individuals. So individuals that do share that they have a concern over the cost, advocating and saying, did you know that there's a fee waiver? Did you know that if you qualify from being low income, you can qualify as through the fee waiver, and you can possibly get half off or all of it off? And I guess I want to take a step back also on that. So there's obviously, we at NALEO provide a free service, right? We provide attorneys on the spot that review cases for free. Obviously, they can go to an attorney and do this on their own, but that is going to cost them more money, right? So I think promoting not just NALEO, but promoting programs like NALEO, if you've heard of agencies like CHIRLA, like Carecen, Catholic Charities, IRC, actually one of our partners, IRC. And so a lot of agencies actually offer free citizenship services now. Like they're everywhere. So I think promoting that, our hotline, which is NALEO Citizenship Hotline at 839-8682, we could take on all calls pertaining to citizenship, and we actually refer out to, based on their address, to the local agency that provides a free service or citizenship. So you can definitely help us with promoting our hotline as a way for people to say, hey, if you have any questions and doubts, call our line. We will go ahead and do a screening. We also answer questions on DACA and TPS through this line. So if you ever run into anyone with that type of questions, our line is also available for that. Community assistance available. Again, I think you all did an awesome first step in participating in our workshop. But there is community assistance available that you all can be a part of, which is volunteering with NALEO or volunteering with other agencies, right? Like your time is so valuable to be able to offer this service, right? So I think whatever you can do to also be part of the assistance of this service would be great and a benefit for everyone in the community that is trying to take that step. So I'm going to stop here on citizenship because I'm going to transition to census. So if there are any questions particularly about what I've talked about around citizenship, and then I'll move into census. Oh, good question. This is, so I don't leave it up to the government because they don't know how to define Latino. They do not know. All right, so this is going to be a very subjective question. Based on where you are in this country, it may be different. So Latino, for the most sense, is being of descent of any Latin American country, whether it be Central, South America, or being born in any of these countries and now being here. That's sort of like the broad definition. But then you might run into your sort of Latino that was born here and for political reasons are like, don't call me that, I'm Chicano, right? You have to respect that person and not call them Latino because they do call themselves. So it's a very subjective question, but for the most part, it's of Latin American descent or born in Latin America and living here. So that's like the broad definition.
Young man, what if one parent is not African American?
They're not Latino.
Not Latino, they're not Latino.
Oh, what if one parent is not Latino and the other person?
That happened with something, and the lady, the mother said, they're not African American, they're Latino. The mother was Latino, but the daddy was some kind of way you're Latino.
Yeah.
It's kind of who the mother was the parent.
Yeah. Well, this might get into our census question because they're going to have to really define themselves. But again, I think this goes back to the way that the person wants to answer that question. It's hard for me to tell them what they are. And I think this country as a whole is going to have a very hard time in the next 10 years defining every ethnic and racial group because we're so like mixed now that that question is going to come up, I think, more. So I think the census, in my opinion, in 2030 is going to be very interesting. I would venture to say it's the race and ethnicity questions will have to change. Question?
This is sort of a related follow-up to her question. Of the 8.8 million, for example, do you know approximately what percentage are English speakers, bilingual, Spanish speakers? You know, do we have, because that's the other question with this population is the language question, not just.
I don't know that, but Dr. Manuel Pastor, he is one of the sort of a person spearheading a lot of the research around lawful permanent residence and all that. I believe he has some research done around the probability of what folks are most likely to take the step towards citizenship and the folks that are least likely. And I think one of the criteria that he's looking at is that criteria of like who speaks sort of like proficient English or lack thereof. But I don't know that number, but I can find out if his research has already figured that out. It's going to be hard. I would venture to say no, but I can find out. But Dr. Manuel Pastor from USC, if you ever sort of look him up and his research, a lot of his research touches on those type of like issues and questions. I don't know the answer fully for that.
Yes.
When you say low income, do you have any figures on that?
Yes,
Does that
so-
vary in parts of the country?
It does, but the federal government looks at low income for the fee waiver side at 200% below the federal poverty guideline. 200%. That's what they use as criteria for that fee waiver, right? Now, I don't know if that's like I don't see that as just low income, but for the fee waiver's sake, they are looking at that as the percentage. Now, there's a way to get around that. So if you receive any type of assistance right now, again, food stamps, Medi-Cal, any of that, then it sort of trumps that. It just you don't have to go that route. But if you don't receive any of that, then you have to prove that through your federal income tax returns. And so that's what it has to be under. It has to be 200% or under. And then the reduced fee waiver has to be 150%. And 150%, yes, 150%, correct.
People, just on that, for people to understand kind of what that means is that we're talking about households, right? And so the family of 4 meeting that guideline, I'm going to throw this ballpark out there, and it's an East Coast one, so it may not be the same here, but you're talking about a family of 4 having a total income of no more than $35,000 to $40,000.
Yeah, it's one number for the entire country. So their whole argument right now over trying to do away with this, because we are going more the means tested benefit route, because that's a little bit different. They want to do away with that because they're saying that no, like we don't want, every state has a different criteria for like means tested benefits, and we don't want to just take the state sort of rules on that. We want to just make it equal. Like, so they want to make it harder, or they want to do away with it completely. So that's one of the fights that we currently have going on. There was a question. Let me see. I'm gonna go here. You're good? Okay.
One of the what are the complications around for citizenship for people, individuals that have like day laborer, house cleaning, gardening?
Like they have a person, like they have a business, small business.
Yeah, but there's all these tax issues that are. Does that complicate the citizenship?
Not necessarily. So there is a question on the citizenship application where they have to show employment or something for the last 5 years. So that's the only place that it might jeopardize that, because if we sort of list on there a self-employment situation, and let's say that self-employment or that person doesn't file taxes, so that's where you can run into some issues. But if not, if this person files taxes, they're pretty much okay as long as you can prove through the taxes and say, I am self-employed, I run a small business, whatever, and I do file my taxes, this is my income. That's an easy way to prove it. But if they don't do that, then it becomes a little complicated. It's not like a complete, like 100% no, but then it would have to take a little bit more sort of like, we would have to have an attorney write up something with them that explains thoroughly like how much they make, how much they work, all that stuff. We would just have to be very clear. No, not necessarily. It's just them. Yeah, it shouldn't involve their customers. Yeah, something that they have to try to prove, right? Because the burden of proof is on that person. It's not on the government. So if you can't prove it to the government, and the government just says, I don't believe you, or the agent says, you know what, you're not providing me enough information, it's on the agent's discretion to decide that. That's why we want to make sure that everyone that goes to the process has been thoroughly sort of vetted by us, and has been thoroughly sort of everything like those type of questions have been answered through their application. Minimize the questions that may come up.
Yes, I taught ESL in high school for 17 years. And something that concerned me was that there was a lot of talk about La Raza and Reconquista and not being excited about being part of the United States, which is, with its flaws, is the best country in the world. And then you go to the DMV and people are raising the Mexican flag on their cars. I want them, and I did my best, to be a part of us and not be balkanized. Are you doing anything to encourage involvement or joy, really, to be part of this wonderful country?
Yeah, I mean, good question, right? So, I mean, everything that we do is about promoting the civic participation in our political process, in our American political process, right? So everything we do is promoting that, right? Voting, doing all that. Now, but when it comes to like cultural and political expression, I mean, we don't dictate that, or we don't really tell anyone what they should sort of feel proud of, right? I think that's up to people to do. My mission is, are you being civically involved, right? Are you, let's say if you care about something, or you're out there and you're protesting, just informing people like, hey, do you for certainly know what you're protesting about, and have you engaged in the different realms of civic engagement, which is not just protest, but have you actually gone to an elected official? And have you actually tried to have that conversation with that elected official, right? So we try to do our best around that. But I think when it comes to like political and cultural expression, it's hard for us to dictate that, or to sort of like try to push them some way, you know? Yeah.
Do you refuse help to Asians?
No, we don't refuse it. We accept anyone that comes to our workshops, right? We've had people from all over the world. The issue is when they speak a language that we don't, right? So right now we do English, Spanish at our workshops, right? But we definitely have partners that deal with other languages. So Asian Americans Advancing Justice is one of those agencies that does an array of different languages from Asia. There's also another organization called IRIS. I think IRC also helps with different languages that may be from different European countries or Middle Eastern countries, right? So we can't sometimes because we may not be able to fully understand. So we may refer them to a partner that can, because again, we want to make sure that everything on the application is accurate. So we won't deny them per se, but we will suggest to them, hey, I think you may want to talk to this agency because they may want to ask you those specific questions that I can't ask you because we can't fully communicate, right? So I think it's a matter of making sure that everything goes right for them.
We probably do. Last question. Can we have one more question before the next part? She has another whole section to go.
Yep. I was one of the ones that went to work, and there were a handful of Asian applicants there, and that because they spoke English, we talked to them in English, and they filled out they were helped.
Yeah.
So it's just if they become aware of it and decide to go.
Yeah, we've had folks from everywhere. I've had folks from Switzerland come to our workshops, France. I mean, I've had a range of people hear about our services, and they'll come. We'll help anyone. It's just a matter of making sure they get the best help, right? And sometimes because of the language barrier, they may not get the best service from us, so it's better to provide them a resource, another free resource to get the best service possible. So, yeah. All right, I'm gonna move on. Switching gears, census. So I've been doing majority of my presentations on census, so I feel like I'm getting census out, but it hasn't even started. But it is definitely a super important topic that will affect everyone for the next 10 years after 2020. So I would definitely encourage every League of Women Voters, not just yours, but every League of Women Voters to get involved in the census work, because this is going to be a huge part of our democracy for the next 10 years. Just to give it some context, right? And I'm sorry that it's super blurry, but the census is mandated by our Constitution since Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was the person who really spearheaded that the census becomes something that is constitutional, right? And when they wrote it, they specifically talked about it as an enumeration of the population of the country of all persons. It did not talk about whether you are a citizen or not, whether you are a certain ethnic group or not, whether you are, homosexual, heterosexual. It doesn't care. It is the enumeration of every person in this country, undocumented or not, right? And so I think when there's been interesting, I would say more in the South, which is interesting because they'll lose out more money too. I don't get it, but their argument is only citizens should be counted because that's who gets all the resources eventually. And I'm like, have at it, right? But you're not going to count your Latinos in your state. You're going to lose a lot of money, right? Like their argument is that only citizens get the benefit. No, right? If you drive down the street, you are benefiting from development, from infrastructure building, which many times is derived from census data, right? The money that comes to states for an array of programs, right? So again, we talk about census data are the basis of our representative democracy, critical to protection of civil rights, billions in federal dollars, and they're used to make informed decisions. We boil it down to two major things: it's power and money, and that's what we boil it down to. For the next 10 years, it will be a struggle of power and money. But if we get it right for our particular state, then we will be in a good position. If we get it wrong, we will be in a really tough position, both on the resource side, but also on the representation side. And I believe I have a slide on representation. Yes, I do. All right. So this is after 2010 census, right? After the 2010 census was done, one of the things that you're going to notice in particular, so it gives you a different range, and I'm sorry that it's super light, but it gives you in a range of like states who gained seats, states who lost seats. One of the things you'll notice is California did not gain or lose. So this was actually the first time in the history of census that California did not gain a seat. And it wasn't because our population didn't grow. It was because we had a large undercount. This time around, California, we are at risk of losing 1 or 2 seats if we don't have an accurate count. And if you want to take a guess of where these 2 seats might go, it might go to Texas and it might go to Florida. And the reason why is because after Hurricane Katrina, both the population in Texas and Florida grew substantially from the folks who left Louisiana. So if we don't get it right, we may in fact lose a seat. Now, we can hopefully stay the same. We may gain a seat. Again, that's I'm not sure, right? But what we definitely don't want to do in California is to lose a seat, right? Something to keep in mind, what does that mean? Again, we lose a congressperson that represents our state. We lose the representation of our state. So one of the things to keep in mind also is that on the Senate side, right, we don't gain or lose anything, right? It's just 2 per state. So on that side, we're many times, not fully represented, right? Because our population size with just 2 senators doesn't make sense, but that's the way it's written, so I'm not going to argue that. But on the congressional side, we can definitely have real representation of our state, which is why it's important to get the census right. These are the top 11 census-guided federal programs that are affected by census. So after the census is done in 2020, then the redistribution of dollars comes out to every state. These are the top programs that are affected by that, and the amount in billions that are affected by that. So Medicaid is really at the top. Medicaid is the top program that is affected by what happens after the census. Then you have federal direct student loans, supplemental nutritional assistance programs, Medicare, Medicare insurance, highway planning construction. So you go down the line. These are the top 11 programs that are affected by the federal dollars after the census count. So again, if we don't get it right in our state, we are on the verge of losing. There's some estimated numbers, by the way, around what does it mean per person, per dollars, and we use it vaguely because it's hard to tell, right? But there's an estimated cost of about $2,000 per person per year that is missed, that person is missed on the census. So in California, we can easily miss 1 million people. Easily. So just add that in your mind, right? $2,000 per person per year for the next 10 years, if we don't count a single person. So our sort of fight for the census and the accurate census is crucial, right? It's really crucial for us, for our children. If you have grandchildren, this affects your grandchildren for the next 10 years. This affects you, right? It affects all of us for the next 10 years. So our focus at NALEO, there's a lot of agencies that are focusing on a lot of communities, what the Census Bureau calls hard to count communities, right? That's why you see HTC. So we focus on Latinos, right? I'm not saying that everyone else should be counted. I think everyone needs to be counted. But our focus is this. Why? Because Latinos are amongst the hardest to count population of any population in this country. And there's all these factors of why. Low-income families, immigrant families, right? Folks that don't want to respond to the federal government about anything. Individuals with low English language proficiency, renters, right? Many times there's multiple families that live in one household. Or if you're like a lot of my families that got houses, we make our garage a second living. So, don't tell the city. But anyways, but those folks go miss sometimes because, again, only one form gets to the house and then only one form is many times filled out. Residents who live in non-traditional housing, as I mentioned, rural residents such as farm workers, right? Highly mobile residents. So farm workers are really seasonal, right? They move depending on what time of year. So these folks are missed many times. Very young children under the age of 5 are greatly missed. I think I have a particular slide on that. Let me see. I'm going to skip this since I talked about that. Oops, I'm going backwards. There you go. So this year, we have a particular emphasis on the on making sure that children 0 to 5 get counted. In 2010, we did a study with the Children's Trends Hispanic Institute, and there was an estimated of 1 million children 0 to 5 that were missed in this country. It's an estimated number. Out of the 1 million that were missed in this country, 400,000 of those were Latino children. And so, by the way, also keep in mind that California led the way in that undercount, unfortunately. As progressive and liberal as we are a little lazy. But we led the undercount of Latino children. LA County was the highest undercount of Latino children at 47,000, estimated. So again, you add the numbers of what that like equates to, and you'll see the factor of why that of the impact of undercounting children as well. Question? So I think I might go into that. I'll give you a quick little hint first. So there's two major factors, and we're actually doing research now, and we're getting all the preliminary findings. But one of them is parents actually just don't know they have to count children. They just assume that it's just adults, and so they don't count children. Number two is, particularly for Latinos, they're just not counting anyone in their household. They're just not responding. So it's two of the major factors that we're seeing already now. But you'll be surprised. A lot of parents don't know that they have to count their little 1-year-old or the little baby that was just born, right? So, question?
So in 2017, there was a lot of energy poured into sanctuary movements and migrant defense, kind of education, know your rights. And so my concern there is that for a lot of undocumented folks, we've been teaching them not to answer their doors. And so now I really see this at cross purposes in terms of like the in-person census taker who might come and knock on your door. So what is the strategy to now work around the migrant defense, know your rights that we've been trying to get everyone to know?
Great question. And yes, definitely something that a lot of organizations then turned around and said, oh man, we've been saying that. So the question is, so for many years, I would even say beyond 2017, right? Like I think it's been for many years, a lot of agencies that have worked around immigration issues, that have worked around not just citizenship, but just like immigration defense, right? And protection of immigrant families. They've been told over and over, don't open your doors to a federal agent, don't open your doors to ICE, don't answer questions, right? Don't sign anything. Like, it's been in a range of things. Then we turn around to the census of saying, oh, well, now you should talk to the government, right? So just to keep in mind how the census works, so an enumerator, which is called the person who comes out to like enumerate people at their home, only comes out when a household does not respond after 4 attempts. Through letters and through forms. So one of the strategies is going to be respond ahead if you don't want that knock on your door, right? That's going to be part of the strategy. If they don't want to respond or they're struggling to respond, that's what we're establishing a lot of the community assistance centers nationwide, which will serve as your one-stop shop to get assisted, to fill out your census and all of that. So that's part of the strategy. But it is something that we still have to fully figure out. Right? This is something that is definitely going to undermine and affect. Do you have a question or want me to? Okay. So it is and it isn't. So the census form is only sent in English and Spanish, but the assistance to fill it out online and over the form is in 12 languages. Now, does anybody know how many languages approximately are in LA County alone? It's about 200. So even with those 12 assisted languages, we're not even close to scratching the surface on the languages that exist in this country, right? Question.
Yeah. So is the forms are sent out initially through the mail to what are residential addresses, and then
Every address.
every address.
Not necessarily, because it's going to go to one of my other slides. So let me wait, and then I'll answer that question. So how many of you knew that this administration particularly added a citizenship question to this form? Everyone knows that, right? All right. Now, how many of you know that this question has never been asked in its form? Never been asked in this form? There has been a citizenship question that was asked in 1950, which was the last time it was added on this form. Now, there is a citizenship question that is asked in the American Community Survey. Has anyone here ever filled out the American Community Survey?
I've been a representative for that.
Okay. Awesome. So the I don't know if you want to explain the American Community Survey, but okay, I'll talk. Yay. So in a nutshell, the American Community Survey is done periodically in this country, and it asks a lot more questions than the census form does. But what it's trying to do is it's trying to understand some of the population sort of trends, some of the populations in terms of income. It's very intrusive in my opinion, but it is important to fill out. It's a lot more thorough than the census form. So it's trying to gather some data in between the censuses, right? Because census is only done every 10 years. So the Census Bureau wants to gather some information. So there is a citizenship question asked on the American Community Survey. That has been asked. But the Census Bureau just came out with their own internal study, and I'm like, you shot yourself in the foot here, that said that that question many times goes unanswered in the American Community Survey.
They used to ask when I started for the Social Security number.
Correct, they do.
We just put zeros in there, all the people, all field people just put in zeros.
They still ask for the Social Security on that survey. They ask for your checking, not account, but they ask for how much you have in your checkings, how much you have in your savings. It's a lot of questions, right? I did it for the first time this year. It took me about an hour. Yeah, it was long. But that's different. It's random. It's random. It's a randomized survey.
Can I ask a question about the survey? If they have that question on the census about immigration, if it is not answered, does it throw the census, that paperwork out of the system? What if everybody just said, you just leave it blank?
We don't know that answer yet. The Bureau has not answered that yet. So I will get to that. Yeah, let me finish and then we'll go to questions. So quickly, the citizenship question is going to be asked or is being requested by this administration. It is currently being fought in the courts. So lower courts, in terms of the New York case, the California case, the New York to Maryland, I believe the California one. At the lower court level, they've already deemed it unconstitutional. So it's now going to the Supreme Court. Good luck with that one. But we'll see. The Supreme Court is supposed to hear arguments and make a decision in either late April or early May. Either way, the decision has to be made by June, because June is when all of the forms go to print. So it's a very fast turnaround. There is bipartisan opposition to this question right now. So even Congress is deciding whether they want to take it on as a fight as well. I don't know if they will or not. I know they're definitely having hearings on it already. If you've seen, Secretary Ross was called in about 2 weeks ago. He really had no definitive answer. The big question is, why did you put a citizenship question on there? In order to put any question into the form, it takes years of studies for that question. They did it in a month, right? No studies, nothing went into that. So again, the question, and then we also found out that through conversations, through emails, phone calls, that Secretary Ross, in fact, told the Department of Justice that you should request from us to add this. And the reason why Secretary Ross did that is because that request came from Steve Bannon and came from Stephen Miller. Obviously, what does that point to? A very politically charged question, right? All right, so we know that this will deter far beyond what we already discussed of why this is important. Now, we do want to tell communities, and this goes back to some of the questions around what do we tell communities now. Data information is protected by Title 13 of the U.S. Code, which means that for 72 years, information cannot be shared. That includes enumerators that come knock to the door. Everyone who works on the census has to take an oath to protect data information of every person, right? Now, what happens is statistical data is provided to, the president after it's done and to the different federal agencies, right? But specific information of household is not. So they can't give my information to a specific federal agency. So, like for instance, a lot of states are preparing just in case this even gets challenged by this administration, right? But we do have to let folks know that it is a protected thing. The U.S. Census Bureau is a very ethical agency, right? They're very ethical. They believe strongly in their oath. So we definitely know that the Census Bureau has the right intentions in mind. But again, the head of the census is appointed by the president. So there's somebody appointed by this president. And then ultimately, the Secretary Ross oversees the whole thing, right? So again, but we do want to tell families that they are protected. I talked about the bipartisan opposition to the citizenship question. More than 60 members of Congress, more than 161 Democratic and Republican mayors have come out against it. So we do 19 attorney generals from different states have come out against it. So there is bipartisan opposition to this. So we're not alone in this fight. But again, it's going to take the will of people continuing to put pressure to get this question ultimately removed from the Census Bureau, from the census form. We've done some research. So we have a campaign called Hágase Contar. And in our campaign, again, if you can subscribe via census text message, you can send the word census to 97779. 97779, yes. To opt in, you could also send us an email at censusgotc@naleo.org and on the subject line, just put subscribe. So we've done already some research amongst Latino communities and some focus groups across the country to try to understand and gauge how Latinos are feeling about the census, what are they sort of thinking about. So generally speaking, we've seen positive views of the census. In fact, people that come from Mexico have actually reported to us that they used to do census in Mexico. So I'm sure this happens in other countries. So they're not foreign to the idea of census. What they are afraid of is when we showed them the citizenship question. That definitely rose the fear, right? And so then what we also have discovered is that the messages that are going to most resonate with our Latino communities are going to be when we talk about the issues around the federal funding affecting programs for children, programs for school, public benefits. Those are going to be the most beneficial messages to our Latino community. And the most trusted messengers are going to be nurses, doctors, health providers, Latino organizations that have been working with Latino communities for a long time. Those are going to be the most trusted messengers. Can anybody take a wild guess what Latinos have been saying about who are the most not trustworthy messengers? Government, elected officials, ICE, yes. They're amongst the most non-trusted elements. So we will work with them, but we won't put them out there in the community because they might not be the most trusted messengers for this. So we have a Hágase Contar campaign. We also have a website that just launched, which is hagasecontar.org. Make sure you count or make yourself count. It's translated in English, right? But this campaign will aim at targeting the Latino populations, particularly the Spanish-speaking Latino populations, which are amongst the hardest to count Latino population. So we encourage you all to visit our website and chat with us and figure out how you can connect with our campaign. These are just some things that keep in mind as we're getting closer to the actual census. So Census Day is April 1st of 2020. It doesn't mean that we should wait to do work on that day. The education, awareness, and outreach work needs to happen now, because families is similar to like elections campaigns, right? How many people have heard, like, you got to touch someone 5 times before they go vote? You got to touch them 7 times. I don't know. I don't want no one to touch me. But anyways, you heard that. But anyways, so some folks, I know it's a joke, some folks are sort of looking at it from a perspective of how many times do we have to tell people about the census? A lot. We have to present. So Univision and Telemundo are joining us in this effort, and they will be putting out a lot of census advertisement with us, which is awesome. A lot of the local medias as well are going to be doing that. But we need to start telling people now through PTAs, through community meetings. We just need to start telling people that. If your League of Women Voters wants to become an official partner, I'm more than happy to join, for you all to join that, because then we could give you all like census buttons and shirts, and like you could just be out there like just promoting, right? As you're doing events, right? It's just a matter of sometimes just having a pen and being like, by the way, census is coming. Here's a pen. Make sure you fill it out, right? So again, the census day is April 1st, 2020. So quickly going back to your questions about how this is going to get rolled out, and I don't have that slide with me. So there's a couple of issues with this way that it's going to happen this time around. The Census Bureau, and not just through them, but through this administration, has cut back dramatically the funding for the Census Bureau. If you recall that in 2010, we were in a recession. So this administration has told the Census Bureau, you will get the same funding that you got in 2010 to do the same work. And they're like, we were in a recession in 2010. We're not in a recession any longer. So because of that, the Census Bureau has now made it so that only 25% of the population, I don't know that population, I think they're going to focus on probably rural communities, things like that, will receive the paper form at the front end, at their house. The 75% remainder of the population will receive a letter or a postcard. That letter or the postcard is going to tell people, go online and fill it out. And it's going to also say, so there's another big fight, right? And it's also going to give a phone number, so the Census Bureau will also have the phone line that you can call in to fill it out. So you could imagine what that means for a lot of our populations, right? So the way that it's going to roll out is that you will receive 3 letters or 3 postcards in your household if you're part of that 75%. After the 3rd one, at the 4th one, you will receive a form. And then you will be told, okay, fine, you didn't respond to us 3 times. Here's the form. Can you please fill it out and return it, right? Now, if you don't respond at all to those 4 attempts, that's when the enumerator goes out to the house. So that's why part of our strategy is, hey, if you don't want enumerators knocking on your door, just respond. Respond, answer it, we can assist you, all that good stuff, right? The other question about leaving a question blank, so this is the hard part. So a lot of people don't know that responding to the census is actually a federal mandate for all of us, right? It's actually the Constitution, it's a law. No one has ever been prosecuting for not responding. Again, I don't know about this administration, but no one has ever been prosecuted. But we don't want to tell community that, right? What we want to tell community is, it is a mandate for you being in this country, whether you're undocumented or not, to respond to the census, right? So we want to tell people that. And also, the question about skipping a question or lying on a question is that for those who will be applying for citizenship, lying on any federal form is constituted as an issue for moral character. Now, we don't, again, this data is protected, but we don't want to take risk, right? So we are telling our people, don't lie on this form either, right? Because it's also against the law to lie. What the federal government has not answered yet is that if a question is skipped, will that also trigger an enumerator? So that's why we're cautious yet about telling anyone to skip anything, because that still may trigger an enumerator coming to the door if they skip a question. So again, I hope that sort of helps to clear up some of those questions. I'm pretty much done. So 1 or 2 questions. I apologize. I know this is a good conversation, but We have one question. I had one there. I had one there. You all can decide. Let me go to you. Yeah, I'll go to you first. No, back. Sorry.
I teach a citizenship class and I also teach ESL as a volunteer. And I've been bringing up the census and just talking about it. When I can tell that my students are like, you want me to do what?
Yeah.
But I also tell them about going to the citizenship clinics. And so are we going to be partnering with all of the organizations that have weekly clinics, like IRIS has weekly clinics, and have a census person, like, so that they're filling out their N400 and able to also fill it out, because that group is already predisposed to give their life story.
So I think we will naturally integrate that, but again, I think the census, in terms of when it's filled out, mainly happens in the month of April. So unless we have a citizenship workshop in April, but I don't think we will, because I think I don't know if other agencies will, I'm sure they probably will, but our focus is going to be strictly census, so I don't think so, but we are already providing information through our workshops, right? But the federal form, there's laws around that where if I'm not a federal worker that took an oath, I can't legally grab a form and give it to someone. It's a lot of regulations around that. So, and actually you work for the Bureau, I'm sure you know those regulations and all that good stuff. But I don't know if there's two questions here. I don't know if who hasn't had a chance? Okay, sorry. Hágase contar. So, either make sure or ensure you count. Like you could say, make sure you count or ensure you count. Yeah.
Okay. And my second question is, can you speak to what the hidden agenda might be behind adding the citizenship question?
That one's hard for me to speak on, right? Because it's really speculation. I don't know. It's hard for me to answer that. I would rather not answer that. I think that you can probably tell why a lot of the other immigration things are happening, and I think you can put it there, but it's hard for me to answer that. The question was, what's the motivation behind adding the citizenship question? Like, what's the hidden agenda? Obviously, I think there is, but it's hard for me to answer that because there's a lot of hidden agendas.
Because there was no research done.
Yeah.
To verify that this was a good idea.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah. So let's do this one and then last one, and then we'll close out. This one?
Well, one problem with the citizenship question is that, as you pointed out earlier, there are 8 million people that are here legally, but are not citizens.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the politicians will tend to say, well, all those people who aren't citizens are undocumented or here illegally. So it's a political question. The other question I ask is, what about people that don't have addresses? How do they participate?
Good question. So and I think this is going to be very important for LA because of our large homeless population. So they will send out enumerators to all of the places where there are a big homeless population. And so in terms of addresses, the Census Bureau allows cross streets to be listed as addresses. But the enumerators also are going to have a special form that is specifically for folks who are homeless. I don't know what that form looks like. I've never seen it, but they did tell us that there is a different form for somebody who is just going to be listed as homeless, but there will be an enumeration or a large operation of enumeration of the homeless population. Last question.
It's important when you're talking about Title 13, when you're in the workshops, to let them know that the census does not share information with other agents. Because I can remember a case that I had the unemployment survey, and the gentleman told me when I had to come back, it was like a 6-point interview. He said, when you left, the child support people contacted me. And I believe it was because I completed that census. So that you've got to get them to have some confidence to know that they're not sharing information with other agencies, else you will lose people. Mm-hmm. Some of them have some problems already associated with things in their life. Right. You got to get it very clear with them, because if they think they're sharing, you won't get any help.
Yeah. No, and that's an issue, and I think on our part we have to inform that, but on the other part, we're also putting pressure on the Census Bureau to live up to that, Title 13. So we're making it up like in front of their face and saying, you must make sure that this administration adheres to Title 13.
Okay, great. Just a really quick add-on to that. Thank you for saying this about the Census Bureau. I worked on the 2010 census, and they take that oath of confidentiality very seriously. They want to get out there and count everybody. So the basic Census Bureau is all about counting everyone. There may be political issues at the very top, but
yeah, they're really ethical folks at the Bureau. That's why, like, I think this administration has unfortunately set a negative light on a lot of agencies where there are very ethical people. So I definitely encourage anyone. By the way, any of you could be enumerators too, FYI. The Bureau needs help. They are totally under numbers for employment. If you have time and you would like to be an enumerator, I would encourage you to apply. Thank you all.
And the pay is good.
Yeah.
The pay is good. Let's thank Eli. Thank you, Eli. Thank you.